In the shadow of towering mesas, destiny weaves an unexpected tale of betrayal and courage. When Morning Star is sold by her own people to ruthless outsiders, her spirit remains unbroken, even as ropes bind her hands. Unknown to her captors, a young Apache warrior named Silent Wolf watches from the cliffs above, his heart burning with the ancient code of honor his elders instilled in him. Against the council's wishes, he sets a daring plan in motion that will challenge everything his people believe about loyalty and tradition. But can one warrior's courage stand against both tribal law and hardened mercenaries who've never failed? To claim their prey, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning Star's fingers trace the ancient petroglyphs etched into the Red Canyon walls, their stories as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Dawn's first light painted the sacred valley in hues of amber and rose, while crushed sage beneath her moccasins released its healing scent into the cool morning air. The turquoise pendant at her throat, her grandmother's final gift, caught the early light and seemed to pulse with its own inner fire. From her vantage point high above the valley floor, she could see the smoke from her people's cooking fires rising in thin blue ribbons against the desert sky. The Chiricahua camp sprawled across the valley floor like scattered prayer beads, each family's wickiup positioned according to tradition and rank. Near the center, the council lodge stood larger than the rest, its smoke hole already releasing tendrils from the morning's discussion fire. Something had changed in recent moons. Morning Star felt it in the way the elders' eyes slid past her when she brought them their morning meal, in the hushed conversations that died when she approached. Even her father, standing bare, had grown distant, spending long hours in council with men she didn't recognize, men whose eyes held the hard glint of desert quartz rather than the wisdom of the ancestors. She knelt beside a particular petroglyph, one showing two figures joined by a line of power that seemed to flow between them like lightning. Her grandmother had often told her this story of two spirits from different paths, joined by destiny against the wishes of their people. The ancient ones left us signs, grandmother had whispered, her weathered fingers following the sacred markings. When the time comes, you must trust what they tell you, even when others have forgotten how to listen. A hawk's cry drew her attention skyward. Through the morning haze, she spotted a lone figure on horseback, moving along the ridgeline above, the western canyon wall. Even at this distance, she recognized Silent Wolf by the way he sat his horse, straight-backed yet fluid, moving as one with the animal beneath him. Unlike the other young warriors who boasted of their skills and adorned themselves with too many feathers, Silent Wolf moved through the world like his namesake, watching and learning, speaking only when words carried true weight. Their eyes had met once, during last moon's blessing ceremony. In that brief moment, Morning Star had felt something pass between them, ancient and powerful, as the petroglyphs beneath her fingers. But they were from different bands within the tribe, and tradition dictated that such boundaries be respected. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Thundercloud, her younger brother, scrambled up the path toward her, his usual grin replaced by a look of urgent concern. "Father calls for you," he said, catching his breath. "The council gathers and they ask for your presence." Morning Star's hand went to her grandmother's pendant, seeking its familiar comfort. In all her 19 summers, she had never been summoned before the full council. Women attended ceremonies and celebrations, of course, but the council's inner circle was the domain of men, particularly in these troubled times, when drought had withered the corn and made game scarce. "Did father say why?" Thundercloud shook his head, his eyes troubled. "Only that you must come now, before the sun climbs higher." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "There are strangers in the lodge. Men I don't trust." Morning Star cast one last look at the petroglyph, at the two figures joined by lightning. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Trust what they tell you. Something stirred in her spirit, a warning as clear as a rattler's buzz. But duty and tradition had their own power, and she could no more refuse the council's summons than she could command the sun to stand still. "I'm coming," she said, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. As she followed Thundercloud down the twisted path, she felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. High on the western ridge, Silent Wolf had paused his horse, his silhouette stark against the morning sky. Like the hawk still circling overhead, he seemed to be watching, waiting, as if he too sensed the changing winds that were about to sweep through their world like a desert storm. The council lodge's interior was thick with smoke and unspoken tensions. Morningstar's eyes adjusted slowly to the dimness as she took her place on the woven mat before the tribal elders. Her father, standing bare, sat at the center, his ceremonial staff, once a symbol of wisdom and justice, clutched tight in fingers that had grown thin with worry. To his right sat Grey Fox, the medicine man whose ceremonies had begun to favor coin over tradition. His face was impassive, but his eyes glittered with something that made Morningstar's skin prickle. Beside him lounged three strangers, Mexican, traders by their dress, though their weapons suggested other professions. "My daughter," Standing Bear began, his voice carrying none of its usual warmth. "These men bring word from the settlements. The white man's influence grows stronger. Our people face hard choices." The tallest of the strangers smiled, revealing a gold tooth that caught the firelight. "We offer protection, señorita. Your father is wise to understand this." Outside, a cold wind moaned through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of coming rain. Morningstar felt the weight of her grandmother's pendant against her chest, its turquoise stone somehow cooler than before. From his position near the lodge's entrance, Silent Wolf shifted slightly. She hadn't noticed him when she entered. He had a way of blending with shadows, but now she saw him clearly, one of several young warriors chosen to guard the council. His face revealed nothing, but his hand rested near his knife with casual readiness. Grey Fox raised the ceremonial pipe, passing it not to the elders first, as tradition demanded, but to the Mexican traders. "These men understand our ways," he said, though Morningstar heard the lie in his voice. "They offer us a place in the changing world." The council's eldest member, White Hawk, spoke from his place in the shadows. "Some changes carry too high a price." His rheumy eyes found morning stars, filled with a sadness that made her heart quicken. "Some traditions once broken cannot be mended." Thundercloud burst into the lodge then, his young face flushed with urgency. "Riders approaching from the south, many riders." The Mexican with the gold tooth rose smoothly, no longer playing. At being a simple trader, right on time, he nodded to Standing Bear. "Your part is done, Jefe. We'll handle the rest." Morningstar saw her father's shoulders sag, saw the shame he tried to hide behind his stern mask. Understanding broke over her like ice water. "Father, what have you done?" But it was Grey Fox who answered, his voice heavy with false sympathy. "What was necessary, child? The tribe will be paid well for this sacrifice." The word sacrifice hung in the smoke-filled air like a serpent about to strike. Morningstar looked to her father, but Standing Bear would not meet her eyes. The ceremonial staff lay across his lap, no longer a symbol of authority, but a burden too heavy to bear. She rose to flee, but strong hands seized her arms. One of the Mexicans pressed a knife to her throat, its blade cold against her skin. "Careful, Bonita. We're paid to deliver you alive, but accidents happen." Through the lodge's smoke hole, she glimpsed the hawk still circling overhead, free and untouchable. Silent Wolf had vanished from his post, whether by choice or command. She couldn't tell. White Hawk's voice cut through the chaos. "The spirits watch Standing Bear. They see how we abandon our children to wolves." "Enough!" Grey Fox snapped. "The decision is made. The payment will feed the tribe through winter." He gestured to the Mexicans. "Take her. The buyers will meet you at the arranged place." As rough hands bound her wrists, Morningstar felt her grandmother's pendant pulse once against her skin, then grow still. Beyond the lodge, thunder growled in the distance, not a promise of rain, she realized, but a warning of the storm to come. Through it all, her father sat motionless, the once proud ceremonial staff lying forgotten at his feet, its carvings of wisdom and justice now just empty symbols of power, corrupted by fear and greed. They bound Morningstar's hands with rawhide and led her from the council lodge like captured game. The morning sun, now harsh and bright, cast stark shadows across faces she had known all her life, faces that now turned away in shame or studied the ground with manufactured interest. Only White Hawk met her gaze, his ancient eyes filled with a sorrow deeper than words. The Mexican traders had dropped all pretense now. Their leader, the one with the gold tooth, pulled a folded paper from his vest and held it high. "The agreement is witnessed," he announced in heavily accented English. "Signed by your council and paid in full." He smiled at Morningstar. "You should be proud, señorita. Your price will feed your people through 3 winters." Thundercloud started forward, his young face twisted with rage, but their father's arm held him back. "The council's word is law," Standing Bear said, though his voice cracked like dry wood. From her place among her captors, Morningstar watched a dark shape move along the canyon rim, a lone rider moving with fluid grace. Silent Wolf. He paused at the edge of a cliff, silhouetted against the morning sky, then disappeared into the maze of red rock formations that lined the valley. The Mexican leader followed her gaze, but saw only empty cliff tops. He barked orders to his men in Spanish, and rough hands pushed her toward the waiting horses. As they lifted her onto a sturdy paint pony, Morningstar caught a glimpse of Gray. Fox passing something to one of the traders, a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of silver. "The first payment," Gray Fox said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent camp. "As promised in the trade agreement, the rest when she's delivered." A cold wind whipped through the valley, carrying with it the scent of sage and coming rain. Morningstar's grandmother had taught her to read the weather, to understand the messages carried on the wind. This wind spoke of change, violent, inevitable change. The Mexican leader mounted his horse, the trade agreement still clutched. In his hand, the paper fluttered like a wounded bird, its edges worn and stained. Morningstar could see her father's signature at the bottom, the characters shaky and uncertain, as if his hand had fought against the act of signing. "Move out," the leader commanded, and the small party began to wind its way down the valley trail. Morningstar twisted in her saddle for one last look at her home. The council lodge stood empty now, its smoke hole no longer breathing the sacred fire's breath. Her father had retreated to its shadows, the ceremonial staff lying broken at his feet. Thundercloud stood alone in the morning light, his small fists clenched in helpless fury. The sound of hooves on stone echoed off the canyon walls as they rode. The Mexican traders talked among themselves in low voices, discussing routes and rendezvous points. Morningstar listened carefully, memorizing each detail. Her grandmother had always said that knowledge was a weapon sharper than any knife. A shadow passed overhead, the hawk that had been circling since dawn. It screamed once high and defiant, then banked toward the western cliffs. In the distance, thunder rolled through cloudless skies. One of the younger traders crossed himself. "Bad medicine," he muttered in Spanish. The leader with the gold tooth laughed. "Superstitions are for old women and children. We have a contract." He patted the trade agreement in his vest. "Paper is stronger than spirits." But Morningstar had seen something the others had missed. A flash of movement in the rocks above, a shadow that moved against the wind. Silent Wolf was paralleling their course, using the ancient hunting trails that her people had traveled. For generations, trails that the Mexican traders, for all their weapons and contracts, knew nothing about. Her grandmother's pendant still hung cool against her skin, hidden beneath her dress. The turquoise stone seemed to pulse with each beat of her heart, a reminder that not all bonds could be broken by paper and silver. Some ties ran deeper than blood, stronger than tradition. As they rode into the shadows of the canyon, morning, Star felt the first drops of rain on her face. The storm was coming, just as the wind had promised. And with it, she sensed, would come changes that no trade agreement could control. Silent Wolf moved through the shadows of the canyon like a spirit, his medicine bundle bouncing softly against his chest with each careful step. The sacred items. Within, eagle feather, white sage, ceremonial tobacco, and a small clay pot of red ochre had been blessed by his grandfather on the day he earned his warrior name. Now they would guide him on a path that defied tribal law itself. From his vantage point, high above the canyon floor, he could track the Mexican traders' progress. They moved with the confidence of men who believed themselves untouchable, their laughter echoing off the ancient walls. 6 riders, all armed with rifles and pistols. The leader rode point, his gold tooth flashing in the morning sun. 2 men flanked Morning Star, while the remaining 3 brought up the rear, alert for pursuit. They hadn't bothered to blindfold their captive. They didn't expect her to survive long enough to remember the route. Silent Wolf touched the medicine bundle, feeling the power of the sacred items within. His grandfather's voice whispered from memory, "Sometimes the true path lies hidden from the many, known only to the heart that dares to listen." The traders were following the main canyon, heading for the borderlands where buyers waited with blood money. But Silent Wolf knew these canyons as intimately as he knew his own heartbeat. 3 miles ahead, a narrow side canyon cut through the red rock like a knife wound. The old ones had used it as a hunting trail, ambushing game that wandered into its natural trap. He opened his medicine bundle with reverent care. The eagle feather, symbol of the Great Spirit's vision, he tied into his hair. The white sage he crushed between his fingers, letting its purifying scent clear his mind. The ceremonial tobacco he offered to the 4 winds, asking for their guidance. Finally, he used the red ochre to paint traditional warrior marks on his face. Not the bold stripes of raid and war, but the subtle patterns his grandfather had taught him, meant to blend with shadow and stone. A distant roll of thunder echoed through the canyon. The storm was building, though no clouds yet darkened the sky. Silent Wolf remembered the stories his grandfather told of spirit storms, times when the natural and supernatural worlds drew. So close they became as one. He checked his weapons, bow and arrows, hunting knife and a coil of rope woven from horsehair and blessed with prayers. No gun. Guns were too loud, too crude for what he planned. This would be a hunt in the old way, guided by the wisdom of the ancestors. Moving like smoke through the rocks, Silent Wolf began making his way toward the side canyon. He would need to arrive well ahead of the traders to prepare what needed to be done. His grandfather's teachings filled his mind: how to read the wind, how to move unseen, how to become one with the desert itself. Above him, the hawk that had been watching since dawn screamed once more. Silent Wolf acknowledged its presence with a slight nod. The bird was no ordinary hawk. It had appeared in his medicine dreams 3 nights running, always leading him toward this moment. He paused at a high point, studying the terrain ahead. The traders were following the easiest path, unaware that easy paths often led to hard endings. Morning Star sat straight in her saddle, despite bound hands, her spirit unbroken. The sight stirred something deep in Silent Wolf's chest, an emotion that went beyond tribal duty or warrior's honor. From his medicine bundle, he took a pinch of tobacco and scattered it on the wind. "Grandfather," he whispered in Apache, "guide my steps on this path. Though it leads away from the council's law, let it lead toward what is right." The wind caught, the tobacco carrying it high into the morning sky. For a moment, it seemed to dance with the hawk's spiraling flight, forming patterns that spoke of things yet to come. Silent Wolf read the signs with his heart, as his grandfather had taught him. Then began his descent toward the side canyon where destiny waited. The sun climbed higher in the desert sky as the traders pushed their horses deeper into the canyon lands. Morning Star's dreamcatcher, woven by her grandmother's hands and hidden beneath her clothing next to the turquoise pendant, pressed against her heart with each step of her mount. Though her wrists burned from the rawhide bonds, she held herself, erect, refusing to show weakness before these men who thought they could buy and sell a free spirit. The leader, whom the others called Vargas, reined his horse alongside hers. "You should eat something, señorita. It's a long ride to the border." He offered her dried meat from his saddlebag, but his gold tooth gleamed with cruel amusement. "Unless you think your people will come for you?" "My people sold me," Morningstar replied in careful English, her voice steady despite the pain those words caused. "But the spirits of this land are not for sale." Vargas laughed, but one of his younger men crossed himself again, eyes darting nervously at the towering canyon walls. The wind had been growing stronger, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something older than memory. Above them, the hawk continued its patient circling. Morningstar noticed how it always seemed to appear when the canyon branched, as if marking the path. Her grandmother had taught her that no coincidence was truly random in these sacred lands. The dreamcatcher trembled against her skin, its intricate web of sinew and beads feeling almost alive. Grandmother had woven it with prayers and power, telling her it would one day help her see the true path when all other paths were hidden by darkness. A stone clattered down the canyon wall, causing the horses to shy. The traders' hands went to their weapons, but they saw only empty cliffs stretching toward the sky. Morningstar, however, caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow flowing like water across the red rocks, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "You're Apache ghosts, making trouble," Vargas sneered, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Not ghosts," Morningstar answered softly. "The ancient ones say that when justice walks these canyons, it moves like wind through shadows, seen only by those who know how to look." One of the rear guards called out in Spanish, pointing to marks in the sandy soil. Fresh horse tracks crossed their path, heading into a narrow side canyon. Vargas cursed and sent 2 men to investigate. Morningstar felt the dream-catcher pulse. Once against her skin, her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper from memory. "The strongest weapons are the ones your enemies cannot see." The side canyon beckoned like an open mouth, its depths hidden in purple shadows, despite the bright morning sun. The 2 men disappeared into it, the sound of their horses' hooves echoing strangely off the high walls. Minutes stretched into an eternity of waiting. No shots were fired, no shouts of discovery rang out, only silence returned from the side canyon, a silence as deep as an ancient grave. Vargas swore again and turned to his remaining men. "Vicente, Diego, go find those idiots before they get lost." He grabbed Morningstar's reins himself, eyes hard with growing fear. "No more delays. We ride straight through." But as the next 2 men approached the side canyon's entrance, a sound drifted down from above, soft as a moth's wing, sharp as a blade. The whispered flight of arrows. Both men clutched their chests and toppled from their saddles, each shaft finding its mark with deadly precision. Vargas yanked Morningstar's horse close to his, using her as a shield as he drew his pistol. "Show yourself, ghost," he shouted, his gold tooth flashing in a snarl. The only answer was the wind, moaning through the rocks like lost souls. The hawk screamed once from directly overhead, and Morningstar felt her dreamcatcher grow warm against her skin, its power awakening to some unseen presence. She looked up at the canyon walls, searching the shadows with eyes taught to see what others missed. For just a moment, she glimpsed a familiar pattern of red ochre, the sacred marks of a warrior who moved like wind through shadow, guided by spirits older than time itself. Vargas's remaining man, the one they called Diego, lay flat against his horse's neck, eyes wide with terror as he searched the canyon walls. The sacred warrior paint that Silent Wolf had applied seemed to shimmer in the heat waves rising from the rocks, making him nearly invisible against the red stone. "It's just one man," Vargas shouted, still using Morningstar as a shield. "One! Apache playing ghost!" But his voice cracked with uncertainty as he watched the shadows dance across the cliff faces. Silent Wolf touched the warrior paint on his face, feeling its power pulse beneath his fingers. His grandfather had taught him its secrets, how each line and curve could bend light, how the sacred colors could make a warrior one with the desert itself. "The old ways are not dead," his grandfather had said. "They sleep in the blood waiting to be awakened." Morning Star felt the dreamcatcher grow warmer still. Despite her bonds, despite Vargas's arm across her shoulders, she sensed a change coming, like the moment before lightning strikes. A sudden gust of wind howled through the canyon, carrying stinging sand and the scent of rain. Diego's horse reared, throwing its rider. The man scrambled to his feet, pistol drawn, firing wildly at shadows. His shots echoed off the canyon walls, like thunder, but hit nothing but stone. Silent Wolf moved. One moment the cliff face was empty, the next he seemed to materialize from the very rock itself, dropping between Diego and his fallen horse. The Mexican's eyes went wide as he recognized the traditional warrior paint, patterns that hadn't been seen in these canyons for generations. Diego tried to bring his pistol around, but Silent Wolf was faster. His knife flashed once in the desert. "Son!" The Mexican's gun fell from lifeless fingers as he crumpled to the ground. Vargas fired over Morning Star's shoulder, the shot deafening in the narrow canyon. But Silent Wolf had already melted back into the shadows, leaving only empty air, where he had stood a heartbeat before. "Brujeria!" Vargas spat, using Morning Star as cover as he wheeled his horse in a tight circle. "Devil's magic!" "Not magic," Morning Star said calmly, though her heart raced. "The ancient ways. My grandmother spoke of warriors who could walk between worlds, guided by spirits older than these stones." "Shut up!" Vargas pressed his pistol to her temple. "Call off your ghost, or I'll send you to join your spirits." The wind died suddenly, leaving a silence deep as a prayer. Even the hawk had vanished from the sky above. Morning Star felt the dreamcatcher pulse against her skin, in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she understood what she must do. "The ancient ones say that a warrior's power lies not in his weapons," she called out in Apache, her voice carrying clearly, "through the canyon, but in his ability to become one with the shadow and light." Silent Wolf heard her words and recognized the teaching, one his grandfather had shared countless times during his training. In that moment, their minds seemed to touch across the space between them, understanding flowing like water over stone. Morning Star saw the shadow shift behind Vargas an instant before it happened. She threw herself sideways in the saddle, dropping as far as her bound hands would allow. Vargas's grip loosened in surprise, and Silent Wolf struck. He emerged from the rippling air like a spirit made flesh, his warrior paint making him seem to flicker between substance and shadow. Before Vargas could turn, before he could bring his pistol to bear, Silent Wolf's knife found its mark. The Mexican's gold tooth gleamed one final time as he toppled from his saddle, the trade agreement falling from his vest to settle in the red dust like a dead leaf. Silent Wolf cut Morning Star's bonds with gentle care, his knife blade sliding between her skin and the rawhide as smoothly as water over stone. The ancient cave paintings that lined the narrow canyon walls seemed to watch them with ageless eyes, their pigments still vibrant in the fading light of day. "Your hands," he said softly, his first words since the rescue. He produced a small pouch of healing herbs from his medicine bundle and began treating the raw circles on her wrists where the bonds had cut deep. Morning Star watched his face as he worked, noting how the warrior paint made his features seem to shift and change in the gathering dusk. "You risked everything," she said. "The council will not forgive this defiance. Some prices are worth paying." His fingers were surprisingly gentle for a warrior's hands. "The old ones taught us to honor the spirit's truth above all else." He gestured to the cave paintings that surrounded them, hunters and spirit animals, dancing figures and sacred symbols, all telling stories that stretched back beyond memory. They had taken shelter in this hidden canyon as the sun began to set, leading their horses through a crack in the rock so narrow they had to walk single file. The Mexican traders would never have found this place. Its entrance was known only to those who kept the old ways. The hawk that had guided them landed on a nearby outcropping, preening its feathers with casual grace. Morningstar noticed that its markings were unusual, patterns that seemed to mirror the cave paintings themselves. My grandmother spoke of such birds, she said, touching her dreamcatcher, spirit guides that appear when the world hangs between balance and chaos. Silent Wolf nodded, finishing with her wrists. My grandfather said the same. He taught me. These canyons showed me the sacred places where our ancestors left their stories. He touched one of the cave paintings, a warrior and a maiden standing beneath a storm cloud shaped like a hawk's wing. Sometimes the old ones paint the future as well as the past. Thunder rolled through the canyon, though the sky remained clear. Morningstar felt her grandmother's pendant pulse warmly against her skin, responding to something in the air, some power older than words. "We cannot go back," she said, though her heart ached at the truth of it. "Not after what the council did, what my father did." "No," Silent Wolf agreed. He began gathering wood for a small fire, his movements efficient and precise. But perhaps that was always the way it had to be. The old stories speak of times when the people must choose between what is easy and what is true. As darkness fell, they sat beside the tiny fire, its flames casting dancing shadows on the painted walls. Silent Wolf shared dried meat and water from his supplies, and they ate in comfortable silence, each lost in thought. The hawk watched from its perch, its eyes reflecting the firelight like stars. Morningstar studied the cave paintings in the flickering light, seeing how the ancient artists had used the rock's natural contours to give their figures depth and movement. "Here," Silent Wolf said suddenly, pointing to a series of symbols near the cave's entrance. "My grandfather taught me to read the Old One's signs. These tell of a time when the people would be divided, when the ancient ways would seem lost." His finger traced the flowing lines. "But they also speak of two who would remember, who would carry the true path forward into a new dawn." Morningstar felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the night air. "And what became of these two?" she asked, though something in her heart already knew the answer. Silent Wolf's eyes met hers across the fire, and in them she saw the same certainty she felt. "The story is not yet finished," he said softly. "We are still painting it on the walls of time." Above them, the hawk screamed once into the darkness, its cry echoing off the canyon walls like a prophecy taking wing. The dreamcatcher pulsed against Morningstar's skin in answer, and the cave paintings seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, as if the spirits of the ancient ones were awakening to witness what was to come. Dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of blood and fire as Morningstar and Silent Wolf prepared to leave their shelter. At their feet lay the broken chains that had bound her, now twisted and useless, like the old bonds that had held them to a corrupted tradition. "Riders," Silent Wolf said, his keen ears catching the distant sound of hoofbeats. "Many of them." He didn't need to explain who they were. The council would have discovered the traders' bodies by now, would have read the signs of what happened. Morningstar touched the broken chains, feeling their cold weight one last time before letting them fall. "Grey Fox will lead them. He knows these canyons almost as well as you do." "Almost." Silent Wolf's slight smile held no humor. "But he forgot the old ways long ago, traded them for silver and lies." He checked his remaining arrows, the fletching done in the traditional way with hawk feathers. "We have one advantage they don't expect." "What's that?" "We're not trying to go back." He helped her mount her horse, his touch lingering for a moment, longer than necessary. "We're following the path forward." They rode out as the sun cleared the canyon rim, taking a trail so faint only eyes trained in the old ways could spot it. The hawk soared ahead of them, leading them deeper into lands that even most Apache feared to enter. The pursuit grew closer as the morning wore on. Occasionally, they caught glimpses of riders on the ridges above, their forms dark against the sky. Grey Fox had indeed brought many warriors. Morningstar counted at least 15 different horses from the tracks they crossed. "They're trying to herd us," Silent Wolf observed, studying the dust clouds in the distance. "Drive us toward the Box Canyon." The Box Canyon was well named, a natural trap with sheer walls and only one way in or out. Any other rider would have no choice but to be caught there. But Silent Wolf had been taught differently. He led them down a twisting path that seemed to end in solid rock. But as they drew closer, Morning Star saw how the ancient floods had carved a narrow crack in the canyon wall, a passage so tight they would have to dismount and lead the horses single file. Behind them, a war cry echoed off the canyon walls. Their pursuers had spotted them. "Quickly," Silent Wolf urged, helping her down from her horse. "The passage opens into a hidden valley. Once through, we can—" An arrow whizzed between them, burying itself in the rock face. More followed, forcing them to take cover behind a fallen boulder. "Surrender now!" Grey Fox's voice boomed across the canyon. "Accept the council's judgment, and you may yet live." Morning Star felt her grandmother's pendant grow warm against her skin. The ancient turquoise seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and in that moment she knew what had to be done. "The chains are already broken," she called back, her voice carrying clear and strong. "You cannot bind what the spirits have set free." Silent Wolf knocked an arrow to his bow, the warrior paint on his face seeming to shimmer with inner fire. "The old ones say that when truth and tradition clash, truth must prevail," he added, his words meant for the younger warriors who followed Grey Fox. "Look into your hearts and remember who we really are." A moment of silence followed his words. Then came the sound of arguments among the pursuers, voices raised in anger and doubt. Morning Star recognized her brother Thundercloud among them, challenging Grey Fox's authority. "Enough!" Grey Fox shouted. "Take them!" But in the time that argument had bought, Silent Wolf and Morning Star had slipped into the narrow passage with their horses. The pursuing warriors would have to come, through one at a time, and Silent Wolf had left them a surprise. The broken chains, carefully arranged across the passage entrance, brought down the first rider who tried to follow. His horse's stumble triggered a cascade of loose rocks that partially sealed the gap. "The old ways, remember," Silent Wolf said, softly as they emerged into the hidden valley beyond. "Even the chains that sought to bind us now help set us free." Morning Star looked back at the dust rising from the blocked passage, then ahead to the untamed lands that beckoned. The hawk circled overhead, crying out in what seemed like triumph. The bonds of the past lay broken behind them. The path ahead was uncertain, but they would walk it together, guided by spirits older than memory itself. The hidden valley cradled them in its ancient embrace as Silent Wolf tended to Morning Star's injuries. His medicine bundle lay open beside them, its contents arranged with ceremonial precision: sage for cleansing, yarrow for healing, and willow bark for pain. The sound of a spring bubbling up through rock provided gentle counterpoint to the distant thunder of pursuit. "My grandfather gathered these herbs under the full moon," Silent Wolf explained, as he crushed the yarrow leaves between his fingers. "He said their power was strongest when harvested in harmony with the old ways." The pungent scent of the healing herbs filled the air between them. Morning Star watched his hands work, noting how they moved with both warriors' strength and healers' gentleness. "Your grandfather taught you many things." He knew the old knowledge would be needed again. Silent Wolf mixed the crushed herbs with spring water in a clay bowl from his bundle, though perhaps not in the way he expected. The hawk that had guided them perched on a nearby boulder, preening its feathers with careful attention. In the valley's clear light, Morning Star could see that its markings were indeed unusual, patterns that seemed almost like written symbols in an ancient language. "The spirits guide us in their own way," she said, wincing slightly as Silent Wolf applied the healing paste to her abraded wrists. "My grandmother used to say that wisdom shows itself most clearly when we stop looking for it." Silent Wolf's hands paused in their work. "Your grandmother was wise in the old ways too. She tried to warn me about the council's corruption, about my father's weakness. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, but somehow, speaking of it here, in this sacred space, helped ease its sting. She said sometimes we must lose everything to find what we're meant to have." Thunder rolled again in the distance, closer now. The pursuit hadn't ended. It had only been delayed by their clever use of the chains. Silent Wolf secured the last of the bandages around her wrists, his touch lingering for a moment. "We should rest while we can," he said, gathering the healing herbs back into his medicine bundle with reverent care. The path ahead leads through territories even the bravest warriors fear to tread. "The spirit lands," Morningstar said softly. Her grandmother had told her stories of these places, where the veil between worlds grew thin, where the ancient ones still walked in forms, both terrible and beautiful. Silent Wolf nodded. "The only way forward is through. Grey Fox and his warriors won't follow us there. They've forgotten how to walk between worlds." The hawk screamed once, as if in agreement, its cry echoing off the valley walls. Morningstar felt her grandmother's pendant pulse warmly in response, while her dreamcatcher seemed to vibrate with its own inner music. "We should eat," Silent Wolf said, producing dried meat and pine nuts from his supplies. "The healing herbs work better with food." They shared the simple meal in comfortable silence, each lost in thought. The spring's song filled the air with peaceful music, while the afternoon sun painted the valley in hues of gold and amber. Despite the danger that pursued them, despite the uncertain path ahead, Morningstar felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her spirit. "In the old stories," she said finally, "when two people share food in a sacred place, it creates a bond even death cannot break." Silent Wolf's eyes met hers across the small space between them. "The old ones say such bonds are not made by chance. They are woven by spirits who see deeper than we can, who know what must be to keep the world in balance." The hawk launched itself from its perch, spiraling up into the turquoise sky. Both of them watched it climb, understanding without words that their rest was ending. The time had come to continue their journey. As Silent Wolf helped her to her feet, Morningstar felt the healing herbs working their ancient magic. Her wounds still ached, but the pain was becoming more distant, more manageable. Like the pain of betrayal itself, it was being transformed into something else, something that would make her stronger for having endured it. "Ready?" Silent Wolf asked, securing his medicine bundle. Morningstar nodded, feeling the combined power of pendant and dreamcatcher pulse against her skin. "The spirits walk with us," she said softly. "How can we not be ready?" A single eagle feather drifted down from the sky, landing between Morningstar and Silent Wolf as they led their horses through the sacred canyon. Its appearance was no accident. In these lands, nothing happened by chance. Silent Wolf picked it up with reverent care, examining its unusual markings. "A gift from the spirits," he said softly, holding the feather so Morningstar could see the pattern of light and dark bars that seemed to form ancient symbols. "My grandfather would say this is a sign of protection and guidance," Morningstar added, recognizing the markings from her grandmother's teachings. The feather seemed to pulse with its own inner light, much like her pendant and dreamcatcher. "The old ones say such gifts show we walk the true path." The canyon they traversed was unlike any Morningstar had seen before. Ancient pictographs covered the walls, their colors still vivid, despite countless seasons of sun and storm. The images seemed to move in the corner of her eye, dancers becoming warriors, becoming spirit creatures, and back again, their guardian. Hawk soared overhead, its cry echoing off the canyon walls in a way that seemed to speak words just beyond understanding. The horses moved carefully, sensing they traveled through places where the normal rules of the world grew thin. "Listen," Silent Wolf said suddenly, raising his hand for silence. At first, Morningstar heard only the wind moving through the canyon, but gradually she began to distinguish other sounds, the whisper of ancient voices, the soft beat of ghostly drums, the rattle of spirit dancers' bells. "The wind dancers," she breathed, remembering her grandmother's stories. "The spirits of warriors and medicine people who guard the sacred places." As if in response to her words, the wind began to move in strange patterns, creating dust devils that spun and twisted like dancers in ceremonial garb. The eagle feather in Silent Wolf's hand trembled, seeming to point the way forward. "They test us," Silent Wolf said, watching the dust devils draw closer. "The old stories say that those Who walk these canyons must prove themselves worthy of passage. The spirit dancers whirled around them, their forms almost visible in the spinning sand. Tall figures wearing masks of power, their movements following patterns older than memory. Morning Star felt her grandmother's pendant grow warm against her skin, while her dream catcher hummed with energy. Silent Wolf raised the eagle feather high, speaking words in a dialect so ancient Morning Star barely recognized it as Apache. The dust devils responded, their movements changing from challenging to welcoming, creating a path through their midst. "The old ones remember us," he said, taking Morning Star's hand to lead her forward. "They recognize those who keep faith." With the ancient ways, they walked between the whirling spirits, their horses following without fear. Morning Star felt the brush of unseen hands against her face, gentle touches that left behind the sensation of blessing. Her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in her mind, "The true path is never easy, but those who walk it are never alone." The spirit dancers accompanied them through the canyon, their presence both protecting and guiding. When they reached a fork in the path, the dust devils swirled to the right, indicating the way they should go. "Gray Fox and his warriors will not find us here," Silent Wolf said, helping Morning Star over a difficult stretch of ground. "These canyons show themselves only to those the spirits choose to guide." As if to confirm his words, they heard distant shouting, voices filled with confusion and fear. The pursuit had reached the canyon's entrance, but could not find the path that seemed so clear to Morning Star and Silent Wolf. The eagle feather glowed softly in the growing dusk, its light combining with the ancient pictographs to illuminate their way. The spirit dancers moved ahead of them, their ghostly forms becoming clearer as darkness fell. Morning Star felt a profound sense of peace, despite their uncertain situation. Here, surrounded by the presence of the Ancient Ones, the pain of her, people's betrayal began to fade. Something new was taking its place, something that felt like destiny. "Look," Silent Wolf said, pointing ahead with the eagle feather. Through the gathering darkness, Morning Star saw a glow that had nothing to do with the setting sun. The spirit dancers were leading them towards something that pulsed with power as old as the earth itself. The ancient rain stick in Silent Wolf's hands sang its water song to the gathering storm clouds, its hollow length filled with sacred stones, and blessed by countless medicine people before him, had been passed down through generations of his family. Now its voice called to powers older than memory itself. "A spirit storm comes," he said, listening to the rain stick's prophecy, "one that will change everything." The sky above the canyon lands had turned the color of bruised flesh, shot through, with veins of lightning that moved in unnatural patterns. Normal storms didn't behave this way, didn't dance with purpose and intent. Morning Star felt her dream catcher and pendant pulse in rhythm with the thunder. "Gray Fox has found a way through," she said, hearing the distant sound of hoofbeats beneath the storm's voice. "He must have remembered enough of the old ways," Silent Wolf nodded grimly, "or forced someone who remembered to guide them." He handed Morning Star the rain stick. "Hold this. Its power may be needed before the night is done." The pursuit grew closer as the storm descended. Lightning walked on the canyon rims, like spirit warriors, while wind spirits howled through the rocks with voices that seemed almost human. The rain stick trembled in Morning Star's hands, its song growing more urgent. They found themselves in a circular canyon, whose walls rose smooth and unbroken on all sides. Ancient petroglyphs covered every surface, their patterns seeming to shift and move in the storm's wild light. The only way out was the way they had come in, and that path now echoed with the sound of approaching horses. "A spirit circle," Morning Star breathed, recognizing the sacred space from her grandmother's stories, a place where the Ancient Ones would come to work powerful medicine. Silent Wolf drew his bow, nocking an arrow blessed with hawk feathers. "And prayer. Then perhaps that's why we were led here." Gray Fox appeared first through the canyon's entrance, his face twisted with triumph and rage. Behind him rode 12 warriors, including Thundercloud, whose young face showed conflict and doubt. "The council's judgment cannot be defied," Gray Fox declared, his voice competing with the thunder. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." The rainstick's song rose to match the storm's fury. Morning Star felt power pulse through it. Into her hands, ancient and wild. "The council's judgment means nothing here," she called back. "This is a place of older laws." Lightning struck the canyon rim, illuminating the petroglyphs with blinding light. For a moment, the ancient images seemed to come alive, warriors and spirit creatures dancing across the stone in patterns of power and protection. "Witchcraft!" Grey Fox spat, but several of his warriors drew back in fear. "The old ways are dead. We make our own path now." "The old ways live," Silent Wolf replied, his voice carried by the wind to reach every ear. "They live in the blood, in the spirit, in the very stones beneath your feet. Look around you. Even now the ancient ones gather to witness." As if in response to his words, the dust devils returned, dozens of them, whirling through the canyon like the spirit dancers they were. The horses of Grey Fox's warriors whinnied in terror, many refusing to advance further. Thundercloud suddenly wheeled his horse around, facing his leader. "He speaks truth. I feel the power of this place, the same power our grandparents taught us to honor." Other warriors began to waver, their faces showing the conflict between duty and deeper truths. The rainstick's song grew louder, calling to something vast and ancient that pressed against the thin walls of reality. Grey Fox raised his rifle, aiming at Silent Wolf. "The old ways die here tonight." But before he could pull the trigger, Morning Star lifted the rainstick high, letting its voice join with the storm's fury. Lightning struck the canyon floor between the two groups, not with destruction, but with transformation. Where it touched, the stone itself seemed to ripple like water, and through that ripple stepped shapes of light and shadow. The spirit dancers made manifest. The horses of Grey Fox's warriors could bear no more. They reared and bucked, throwing riders and fleeing back the way they had come. Only Grey Fox kept his seat, his rifle now trained on Morning Star. "The spirits themselves stand against you," Silent Wolf said, his arrow aimed at Grey Fox's heart. "Will you still deny their power?" Thunder rolled overhead like the voice of judgment itself, while the spirit dancers moved closer to Grey Fox, their forms becoming more solid with each step. The rainstick pulsed in Morning Star's hands, its ancient magic reaching toward a crescendo that would change everything. In the storm's wild light, Thundercloud pulled something from his medicine pouch, a weathered journal bound in deerskin, its pages yellow with age. "Grey Fox," he shouted above the wind, "before you spill more blood you must see this, the Elder's final prophecy." The journal had belonged to Whitehawk, discovered after the Ancient One's death just days ago. Its pages contained not just his wisdom, but a vision that had haunted his final hours. Grey Fox's rifle remained aimed at Morning Star, but his eyes flickered with uncertainty. The spirit dancers moved closer, their ethereal forms casting strange shadows in the lightning's glare. "Read it," Silent Wolf commanded, his arrow still trained on Grey Fox. "Read what the eldest of our people foresaw." Thundercloud opened the journal with trembling hands. The rainstick's song seemed to quiet, as if the very storm itself leaned in to listen. His young voice carried clear through the canyon. "When the people forget the old ways, when silver blinds them to truth, two spirits shall rise from different paths. One born to lead but sold to shadow, one trained in ancient wisdom but walking alone. Their union will bridge the breaking world. Their love will remind us who we were meant to be." Morning Star felt her grandmother's pendant pulse with recognition, while her dreamcatcher hummed in harmony with Thundercloud's words. The spirit dancers swayed to the prophecy's rhythm, their forms growing more distinct. "There's more," Thundercloud continued, turning a page made translucent by the storm's light. "The betrayal of blood will set them on their path. Through canyon and shadow they will journey, guided by wings of the spirit world. In the sacred circle they will stand against false judgment, and there the ancient ones will rise to restore what was forgotten." Grey Fox's hands trembled on his rifle. "Lies!" Whitehawk was old, his mind wandering. "Look around you." Silent. Wolf's voice carried power that seemed to come from the stone itself. Every word of the prophecy unfolds before your eyes. Are you so blind to truth that you cannot see what the spirits themselves proclaim? The journal's pages ruffled in a wind that touched nothing else, turning to one final entry. Thundercloud read through tears. When this vision comes to pass, the people must choose. Remember who they are, or fade like mist before the dawn. The path of greed leads to dust and shadow. The path of truth leads to renewal. Lightning struck. Again, closer this time, illuminating the petroglyphs that covered the canyon walls. In that brilliant moment, Morningstar saw that the ancient images told the same story. Two figures standing against darkness, surrounded by spirit dancers, their love bridging worlds. Your own greed blinds you, she said to Grey Fox, understanding, flowing through her like spring water. The silver you took to sell me has bought only the death of everything our people hold sacred. The spirit dancers moved again, forming a circle around them all. Their ghostly forms had become so solid that individual features could be seen, faces of ancestors, of medicine people and warriors who had walked these canyons since time began. Among them, Morningstar recognized her grandmother's face, while Silent Wolf saw his grandfather standing tall and proud. The ancestors had come to witness the prophecy's fulfillment. Grey Fox's rifle barrel wavered, then slowly lowered. The weight of ages pressed against him, the judgment of all who had kept the old ways alive through countless generations. His face showed the struggle between pride and truth, between the path of silver and the path of spirit. The choice stands before us all, Thundercloud said, closing the sacred journal. Just as White Hawk foresaw, remember who we are or fade away forever. The rainstick's song changed, becoming softer, almost gentle. The spirit dancers moved closer still, their circle tightening around the small group of living people who stood at this crossroads of destiny. Morningstar felt wisdom flow through her, not just her grandmother's teachings, but the collected knowledge of all the strong women who had come before. She understood now why the spirits had led them here, why this moment had been prophesied since before her birth. Silent Wolf lowered his bow, recognition of the same truth shining in his eyes. They had been brought together not just to save themselves, but to save their people, to bridge the chasm between what was and what could be. The warrior's shield that Grey Fox carried, passed down through generations of tribal leaders, slipped from his grasp and clattered against the stone. In the storm's wild light, its surface seemed to reflect not just the lightning, but the faces of all the honorable chiefs who had borne it before him. The prophecy cannot be true, he insisted, but doubt had crept into his voice, like evening. Shadows. We made our choice when we embraced the new ways. You made that choice for others, Thundercloud interrupted, clutching Whitehawk's journal to his chest. You chose silver over spirit, betrayal over honor. The spirit dancers drew closer, their ancestral faces stern with judgment. Among them, Whitehawk's form had grown particularly clear, his ancient eyes fixed on Grey Fox, with a mixture of sorrow and hope. Morningstar stepped forward, the rain stick still singing in her hands. Look at your shield, Grey Fox. See how its ancient symbols tell the same story as the prophecy. The old ones knew this moment would come, knew we would have to choose between truth and comfort, between honor and ease. Silent Wolf moved to stand beside her, his presence steady as stone. The shield bears the mark of unity, he said, pointing to a particular symbol worked in copper and turquoise. Not the unity of force or fear, but the unity of hearts walking the same path. Grey Fox stared at the shield lying at his feet. The craftsmanship that had created it belonged to an age when every line and symbol carried deep meaning, when art itself was a form of prayer. His hands, stained with the silver of betrayal, seemed unworthy to touch it now. Thunder rolled overhead, but the spirit dancers kept the rain at bay, creating a space of calm within their circle. Morningstar felt her grandmother's pendant pulse with approval, while her dreamcatcher sang harmony with the rainstick's ancient voice. I remember, Grey Fox said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. "When I was a boy, my grandfather told me that leadership is not about making people follow, but about remembering the path for those who have forgotten." He looked up, meeting Morningstar's eyes. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that truth." The spirit dancers moved again, their circle opening to allow Whitehawk's form to approach. Though he had no physical voice, his presence spoke clearly to every heart. The time of choosing has come. Thundercloud laid the journal atop the fallen shield. The prophecy speaks of renewal, not destruction. It offers a way to honor both, old and new, to remember who we are without rejecting what we might become. Silent Wolf kept his bow ready, but lowered. The choice belongs to all of us. Now, stand with the prophecy, help us rebuild what was broken, or stand aside and let the spirits guide their chosen ones. The remaining warriors who had followed Grey Fox shifted uneasily on their horses. One by one, they looked to the spirit dancers, to the ancient petroglyphs that seemed to move with lives of their own, to the two young people who stood at the center of prophecy itself. Grey Fox knelt slowly, touching the shield with trembling fingers. "My grandfather also said that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising again with wisdom earned from the fall." He looked up at Morningstar and Silent Wolf, his face transformed by understanding. "The prophecy is true. I see it now, not just in Whitehawk's words, but in the very stones of this sacred place." The spirit dancers drew closer still, their forms beginning to shine with inner light. Whitehawk's spirit smiled, and in that smile lay forgiveness and hope. Morningstar felt power pulse through the rain stick, through her pendant and dream catcher, through the very air itself. The storm above was changing, its wild energy focusing like sunlight through crystal. The moment of transformation had arrived, not just for her and Silent Wolf, but for all their people. The shield was meant to protect our people's heart, Grey Fox said, rising with new purpose. Not their wealth or their pride, but their spirit. He lifted the shield, now glowing with reflected lightning, and held it out to Silent Wolf and Morningstar. "Take it. Let it serve its true purpose." Once more, the sacred drum that Thundercloud retrieved from his horse spoke with the voice of ages. Its deep rhythms called across the canyons, summoning all who still remembered the old ways. As its song merged with the rainstick's voice, the storm above began to dance in patterns not seen since the time of the ancestors. The people must. "Witness," Grey Fox said, his transformation complete as he took his place among the spirit dancers. "All must choose the path forward." From every direction, riders emerged through the storm's curtain. First came the scattered bands of their own people, families who had kept to the old ways in secret, training their children in ancient wisdom while pretending to embrace the new. Then came representatives of other tribes, Navajo, Hopi, Zuni, drawn by the drum's sacred call and the power that pulsed through the spirit lands. Morningstar watched them gather, feeling the weight of destiny in every hoofbeat, every rattle of medicine bags, every whispered prayer. Her grandmother's pendant thrummed against her skin, recognizing the gathering of power. Silent Wolf stood beside her, the warrior's shield now strapped to his back, its copper and turquoise symbols catching the lightning's dance. "The drum speaks what the prophecy foretold," he said softly. "The reuniting of all who walk the true path." The spirit dancers moved among the gathering crowd, their ancestral faces now clear to all who had eyes to see. Whitehawk's form had grown particularly solid, as if the power building in the sacred circle was allowing him to bridge the gap between worlds. Thundercloud's drum changed its rhythm, calling forth memories buried deep in blood and bone. Warriors from different tribes began to dance, their feet moving to patterns older than memory. Medicine people raised their voices in songs that hadn't been sung openly in generations. "Look," Silent Wolf breathed, pointing to the canyon's rim. More spirits were gathering, not just their own ancestors now, but the ancient ones of all. The desert peoples, their combined presence pressed against the veil between worlds, making it thin as morning mist. The drum's voice grew stronger, joined by other drums, as they were unpacked from sacred bundles. The rain-stick's song wove through the rhythms like lightning through storm clouds. Morning Star felt power building in her hands, in her heart. In the very air she breathed, Grey Fox stepped forward, his voice carrying to all present. For too long we have walked divided paths, forgetting that all ways lead to the same center. The prophecy shows us how to remember, not just our own truth, but the truth that binds all people of the desert lands. The gathered tribes murmured in agreement. Many had seen their own prophecies and visions of this moment, had felt the stirring of ancient power in their dreams. Thundercloud's drum reached a crescendo, then fell silent. In that silence, White Hawk's spirit spoke, his words. Clear in every heart, the time of renewal is at hand. Through these two, his gesture encompassed Morning Star and Silent Wolf. The bridge between worlds will be restored. The spirit dancers began to move in complex patterns, their forms weaving together like strands of light. The warrior's shield on Silent Wolf's back pulsed with answering power, while Morning Star's pendant and dreamcatcher sang with the voice of prophecy itself. Other spirit dancers emerged from the gathered crowd, the personal guides and guardians of each tribe, joining their power to the growing circle. The storm above mirrored their dance, lightning steps matching spirit steps in perfect harmony. Morning Star felt wisdom flow through her, deep as the canyons themselves. This was why the spirits had guided them here, why the prophecy had been written in White Hawk's journal, why even betrayal had served a greater purpose. This gathering was about more than two young people defying corrupt authority. It was about remembering who they all were beneath the masks of change and time. Silent Wolf's hand found hers as the power continued to build. Together, they stood at the center of the sacred circle, surrounded by the living and the dead, the physical and the spiritual, the past and the future. The rainstick's song reached for something vast and ancient, something that had slept in the desert lands since the first people walked these canyons. The time of awakening had come. Ancient thunderstones, sacred crystals passed down through. Generations of medicine people were placed at the four directions of the sacred circle. Each one pulsed with its own inner lightning, responding to the storm that danced overhead. As the final stone was set in place by a Hopi elder, power surged through the circle like a living thing. The spirit dancers moved faster now, their forms blending with the lightning above until it was impossible to tell where physical reality ended and spirit world began. The gathered tribes watched in awe as the veil between worlds grew ever thinner. But darkness gathered at the circle's edge, shadows deeper than night, shaped like the greed and fear that had nearly destroyed their people. The thunderstones flared in warning as these shadow spirits pressed against the sacred space. The old evil rises to challenge the renewal, Grey Fox said, his voice heavy with recognition. The same darkness that tempted us with silver and false power. Silent Wolf raised the warrior's shield, its copper and turquoise symbols blazing with protective fire. Morning Star lifted the rainstick, its song rising to battle the shadow spirit's whispers. Thundercloud's drum took up the challenge, its voice calling to the heart of the storm itself. All must choose, White Hawk's spirit called, his form bright against the gathering darkness. Stand with the light or fall with the shadows. The thunderstone's power formed barriers of lightning between the shadow spirits and the sacred circle. But darkness seeped through like water, taking shapes from nightmare, corrupted versions of ancient spirits, twisted by centuries of greed and betrayal. Morning Star felt her grandmother's pendant pulse with fierce energy. The dreamcatcher hummed with power, its web catching and dissolving shadow spirits that ventured too close. She understood now why these items had been passed down to her. They were weapons in a war older than memory. Silent Wolf stood beside her, the warrior's shield radiating protection over the gathered tribes. The old ones knew this battle would come, he said, his voice carrying through the storm's fury. They prepared us through prophecy and sacred items, through stories and songs remembered in blood and bone. The shadow spirits pressed harder, their whispers promising wealth, power, freedom from the burden of tradition. Some among the gathered tribes wavered, drawn by these dark promises. But then Thundercloud's drum changed its rhythm, calling forth memories of ancestors who had died protecting sacred truths. The spirit dancers moved in answer, their forms growing brighter still. Each carried something precious, the first sacred pipe, the original medicine bundles, ceremonial items thought lost to time. Their combined power pushed back against the darkness, driving the shadow spirits from the circle's edge. "Now," Whitehawk commanded, "while the worlds are joined, while the power flows strongest." Morningstar and Silent Wolf stepped to the circle's center. The rain stick and warrior's shield touched, sending sparks of spirit fire into the storm above. The thunderstones pulsed in rhythm with Thundercloud's drum, forming a pattern of light that mirrored the ancient petroglyphs. Power surged through them both, not just their own strength, but the combined power of all who stood in the sacred circle, both living and dead. Morningstar felt her grandmother's wisdom flow through her veins like lightning. Silent Wolf channeled the warrior strength of countless generations. Together, they raised their voices in a song older than words, a song of renewal, of remembering, of bringing light to shadow. The spirit dancers joined them, then the gathered tribes, until the canyon rang with music that shook the very stones. The shadow spirits trembled before this onslaught of united power. One by one, they dissolved like mist in morning sun. The darkness retreated, taking with it the whispers of greed and fear that had nearly destroyed their people. In that moment of victory, the thunderstones released their final power. 4 bolts of lightning struck the sacred circle simultaneously, forming a cross of light that pierced the storm above. The veil between worlds parted like a curtain, revealing visions of what could be. Their people walking in balance between old and new, tradition and progress, earth and spirit. The warrior's shield and rainstick pulsed once more, then fell. Silent, the storm began to gentle, its wild energy transformed into peaceful rain that would bring renewal to the desert lands. Morningstar and Silent Wolf stood transformed as well, marked by power that would never fade. They had fought the ancient darkness and won. But this victory was only the beginning. Dawn painted the desert in shades of hope as the women of all tribes worked together, weaving a unity blanket that would bind their peoples as one. Each pattern told a story of betrayal transformed to blessing, of darkness yielding to light, of ancient wisdom flowing into a new age. Morningstar watched their skilled hands work, understanding that this blanket was more than cloth and color. It was prophecy made manifest. The unity blanket grew beneath their fingers, incorporating threads from each tribe's sacred garments, beads from medicine bundles, even strands of horsehair from the mounts that had carried them to destiny. At its center, they wove an image of 2 figures surrounded by spirit dancers, standing beneath a storm-crossed sky. "So much has changed," Thundercloud said, sitting beside his sister as she added her own contribution to the weaving, threads carefully unraveled from her grandmother's dream catcher. "Yet the old ones say that change itself is part of tradition." The sacred circle still hummed with power, though the spirit dancers had faded with the storm's passing. Whitehawk's final appearance had left them with clear instructions for the path ahead. How to blend old ways with new understanding, how to walk in both worlds without losing their souls. Silent Wolf approached, carrying items gathered from the battlefield of spirit and shadow. The warrior's shield and rainstick had been transformed by the power they'd channeled, their surfaces now marked with symbols that seemed to move in the morning light. "The elders are gathering," he said, helping Morningstar to her feet. "It's time to share what the spirits have shown us." Representatives from all tribes sat in a great circle, their faces showing both wonder and uncertainty at all that had occurred. Grey Fox had taken a place among them, his own face transformed by humility and new wisdom. Morningstar stood before them, feeling the weight of her grandmother's pendant and the renewed dream catcher against her skin. The prophecy spoke of two paths, she began, her voice carrying clearly to all present. One leading to dust and shadow, one to renewal. But the spirits have shown us that these paths are not separate. They are braided together like the strands of this unity blanket, teaching us through both darkness and light. Silent Wolf raised the transformed warrior's shield, its surface catching the rising sun. Our people feared that remembering the old ways meant rejecting the new. The shadow spirits used this fear to divide us, to make us forget who we truly are. He lowered the shield, meeting the eyes of each tribal representative. But the ancient ones have shown us a different truth, that wisdom lies in learning to walk both paths with honor. The unity blanket was passed around the circle, each leader touching its woven prophecy with reverence. They could feel the power in its patterns, the truth in its carefully chosen threads. Grey Fox stood, his voice heavy with emotion. I stood with darkness because I feared our people would be left behind by the changing world. I forgot that true. Strength lies not in competing with change, but in remaining true to who we are while facing it. Thundercloud added his own witness, holding up Whitehawk's journal. The prophecy was not just about two young people defying corrupt authority. It was about all of us remembering how to bridge worlds, the physical and spiritual, the traditional and progressive, the individual and communal. Morning Star felt the first rays of sun touch her face, warming her like a grandmother's blessing. The unity blanket had returned to her hands, and she could feel the combined hopes and prayers of all who had contributed to its making. The shadow spirits will always whisper, she said softly, running her fingers over the blanket's central image. Greed and fear will always test us, but now we remember how to stand together, how to weave light from darkness, how to make beauty from what would destroy us. Silent Wolf took his place beside her, their shoulders touching lightly. The warrior's shield and rain stick they placed upon the unity blanket, symbols of protection and blessing for the path ahead. Around them, the gathered tribes began to sing, each in their own language, yet somehow creating harmony instead of discord. Their voices rose like smoke from a sacred fire, carrying prayers of thanksgiving to the morning sky. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but its power continued to work through them all. The unity blanket would be displayed in every tribal gathering, reminding them of this dawn and all it promised. The path ahead was neither purely old nor new, but a careful braiding of both, strong enough to carry them all into the future while keeping their spirits anchored in eternal truth. As the sun climbed toward noon, 2 wedding baskets were brought forth, one woven by Morning Star's people, one by Silent Wolf's band. The ancient tradition called for each family to create a basket showing their hopes for the union, their patterns telling stories of what was and what could be. The baskets were masterworks of meaning. Morning Stars showed a dawn sky with spirit dancers weaving between sun rays, while Silent Wolves depicted a warrior standing between shadow and light, protecting sacred wisdom. When placed side by side, the patterns flowed together as if they had been designed as one. The circle closes, Whitehawk had said in his final appearance. What was broken is renewed. Now watching the tribes gather for the ceremony, Morning Star understood the deeper truth of those words. This wedding was more than a union of 2 hearts. It was the sealing of a new covenant between their people and the ancient ways. Thunder. Cloud led the blessing ceremony, his young voice strong with newfound authority. Grey Fox stood witness, his presence a testament to transformation's power. The unity blanket was draped around both their shoulders, its woven prophecy warming them like sunlight. Silent Wolf's grandfather appeared briefly among the spirit dancers, just long enough to place his hands in blessing over the wedding baskets. Morning Star's grandmother's spirit stood beside him, their combined presence bridging worlds, just as their grandchildren would bridge peoples. When the final prayers were spoken, when the last songs faded into desert wind, Morning Star and Silent Wolf stood together at the center of the sacred circle. The warrior's shield and rain stick had been mounted on the council lodge's wall, where they would remind all who saw them that strength flows from wisdom, not force. Their eyes met, holding memories of shadows overcome and light restored. The hawk that had guided their journey circled once overhead, then flew toward the dawn, its work complete. "The path ahead will not be easy," Silent Wolf said softly, touching the unity blanket that bound them. Morning Star smiled, feeling her grandmother's pendant pulse with approval. "But we walk it together," she replied, "carrying the wisdom of both worlds." Around them, the desert bloomed with unexpected flowers, small miracles born from the spirit storm's blessed rain. The Ancient Ones had said that when truth returns to the people, the very earth celebrates its children's awakening. And so it was, as it was meant to be, as it would be for generations yet to come. Beauty growing from Shadow's heart, wisdom braided with change, and love stronger than any darkness.